There-
Hey everybody, welcome back to Talks with Thompson. I'm really excited to talk about Lauren Norris, all things Lauren Norris today on the podcast. Lauren and I have known each other for a very long time, and I'm excited to get her to talk about her background in design and marketing. Lauren, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Happy Sunday
You,
morning.
you are in technical sales at Butler Technologies.
That is correct.
And you're also the immediate past president of the American Marketing Association, Pittsburgh Chapter.
Yep.
Those are, as I understand it, the technical sales job is new, and the past presidency is old.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm really excited to learn more about your new role, plus your role in the AMA. But before we get into that, I need to know your point of origin. Where was the start? Where did your career kick off? What was that spark or idea that said I need to be in design and marketing? What's your background?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because it's been a zigzag journey for sure. But right out of college, I actually started at Indiana University of Pennsylvania. And I went in undecided. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to study, just kind of taking basic, core classes while I was there. And probably at the end of my first semester there, I was really loving, my art background. I grew up, playing the piano, trying the violin, playing the guitar, trying to have double art classes in school and just really flexing that creative side of my brain. But then as I up through high school and, late 90s exposure to all the technology, I just started blending my love of technology and art together. And at the end of the first semester, I'm like, you know what, I think like to me, that makes sense. Graphic design, your 18-year-old brain, how that, kind of goes together. And started going through the course book to see where I could define my major and get into those classes. And that was one of the only majors at IUP that they did not have at the time. I think since they've added that, but they didn't have it. So I started looking to transfer and I evaluated Duquesne. I did a tour at the Art Institute, and I can't remember a couple other schools that had similar programs in that regard, and ended up landing at the Art Institute in their Bachelor's of Science program for graphic design. So I was there in the early 2000s. It was amazing. Like the professors were also business owners and working on real projects and really being submerged from the beginning. So that was a great foundation to all things that follow.
I've always made the point to say that graphic design is like the gateway discipline, because it opens you up to so much. You can literally work in any industry with a graphic design background. And more importantly, it's also, aside from being the gateway, it's also a great springboard into other disciplines.
Yes.
So you went to the Art Institute, you had your design degree. Well, how did you start your career after you graduated?
So right after I graduated, I went to a company called Ansoft, and I was working at an inside Marcom department that was, 7 people, back in the day when they had those. I think they're coming back around to that size, but in between crashes and downturns. Back then it was an internal team, and so many of my friends were going the agency route, and I ended up just, landing an opportunity in a corporate setting, and they developed electrical engineering software. So I was part of the team where I designed literature, CD covers for the software and the software books and everything in between. And then I was also traveling to a few of the trade shows to help there as well. So it was a nice eclectic background and experience that I was getting there.
And you might need to refresh my memory on this. At what point did we meet? This had to have been at least around 2007,
I was
2008.
trying to remember that. I think it was when I started volunteering for CF, and your office was in the same hallway as their offices over on the north side, or by Heinz Lofts, right?
Yeah, the
And
North Shore.
and I had a freelance client, and I remember Cheyenne was like, "Oh, you got to go talk to RJ," and I'm like, "I feel like I know him from school, but you didn't go to the Art Institute." I couldn't remember. It was just like
No,
a familiar connection. And then, yeah, I think that's where we really connected, was just as designers, volunteering for CF and
right.
all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that was so for the uninitiated, the CF is the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, and my first agency, we were stationed in this office
Yeah.
building on the North Shore in Pittsburgh, right underneath the Veterans Bridge.
Right.
So yeah, but we had clients in the building. The CF Foundation was one of them, and it seemed like at that time that was like a really magical time for folks like you and I and sort of our generation, because they were all converging at the
Yeah.
Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, the 50 Finest event, the Great Strides event. We were all sort of connected into that. And we were all still relatively new in our careers as well. And so, things were really exciting and things just kind of happened organically.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a while. And we lost touch, not lost touch, but over time. And then, you came on board with AMA committee, and I was like thrilled. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe.
He's back.
You wanna go- yeah. So it's been awesome reconnecting for sure.
When I got my sort of separation from Pittsburgh, I've lived here the entire time for my whole career, but my separation really started in 2011,
Mhm.
which was, probably right around the same time that, you know, I was moving on to a different thing. You were moving on to a different thing.
Yep.
Some of our crew were moving on and evolving, right? But I started teaching at Edinburgh, and then after that, Youngstown for 7 years,
Mhm.
and I lost my whole base of people in Pittsburgh, and I kind of had to fight to get them all back.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I'm so glad to be back. I've been back in the city working for about 2 years now, and being connected to the AMA and being so welcomed, with loving open arms was really gratifying and very special for me. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Um, so now we're doing the AMA thing, and as I jumped on, you're getting off, but you're kind of on the periphery.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Semi-retired.
yeah,
Semi-retired. Jamie's
so-
making sure I stay on another year, but
right.
it's the growth and expansion and processes and all the things that we've implemented over the last 4 or 5 years has been, game changing for our chapter. So it's been really cool to see that progression.
So I want to ask you about this because I think you and I share similar interests and in leadership and qualities to be in leadership.
Mhm.
What inspired you to take up the executive role, the executive officer sort of role in the AMA?
Yeah, so I was recruited into the board as VP of membership when I started, and really liked working in that role. I was in that role for about 6 months, and that fall we have our regional retreats every year. When
Mm,
they were in person, it kind of goes around different cities of the region. So that year we went to DC, and I went with then President Josh Gamiz and our VP Communications Dan Prokop at the time. So the three of us went down for that meeting, and you get to see this bigger vision on a national level, even at the regional retreats. And it was DC chapter hosted, Baltimore was there, people from Virginia, Jersey, New York. So it's about, I don't know, 50 to 100 board members from all these different chapters in the region, having all day meetings, collaborating, making connections. And that was invaluable to me. I saw then, even 5 years ago, that this is bigger than the Pittsburgh chapter,
mm.
personally, professionally, who I could learn from, who you can connect with. So that was a huge thing. And on the drive back, Josh was like, would you be interested in being a president-elect? And I go, oh, I haven't been here long enough. I just started. I feel like I haven't sunk my teeth into membership,
Right.
maybe further down the road. And he was like, no, I think it'd be okay now. And I'm like, nah, I'm good. Like, I feel like that's a big, on taking. So I don't know. He asked me maybe two more times. And finally I just said, okay, like I'll entertain the idea. So, yeah, so that's kind of just how it naturally happened. And I ended up doing a 2-year term. We had a ton of board transition. A lot of things were happening in national that just, it made sense. Some chapters to have 2-year term presidents. So, ended up doing the 2-year stint, and Jamie's moving into his as well. So, it's actually kind of nice to have some of that continuity, seeing certain things through. And I know they're talking about maybe doing that, or certain chapters being able to do that. So
And as I understand it, you work with Jamie. You're both at the same company.
yeah, now we do.
So
Yeah.
so he can literally just tap on your office door when we're in person, say, "Hey, how do you do this?" Or
Right.
need some
Right.
advice.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, I've really enjoyed my time in AMA and connecting with a variety of different professionals, marketing and creative professionals. We have a really eclectic,
Yeah.
uh, diverse range of professionals in our membership. So I'm really looking forward to what's coming next. And to your point about those regional, those immersive regional meetings, leadership meetings. A few years ago, I started the Awesome Foundation Youngstown chapter,
Okay.
and we got to go. Myself and a colleague, we were able to go down to DC, as a matter of fact. And it seems like that's where all the leadership conferences
Right.
happen. I
Right.
wonder why. Um,
Yeah.
we went down there for the Awesome Foundation, and we got to meet people that ran chapters in every state and
Mhm.
a variety of countries. A lot of
Um,
Europe, and I think there was a few uh, African chapters, which
mhm.
was awesome, just incredible. So that type of stuff really charges you up,
Yeah. Well,
and
I think, oh, sorry, go ahead.
it makes you feel like you can make a difference on an
Yeah.
entirely different level than just in your day job.
Right. Well, and I think too, I mean, there's so much learning and collaboration going on in your own chapter. And then when you see what's going on in neighboring areas and what they're kind of thinking through, and you just kind of continually level up with each other
Mhm.
and, keep getting better and learning different things. And yeah, it's pretty cool to watch. I remember one of the years I was in Chicago for our annual leadership summit. I was sitting with board members from AMA Hawaii. They
Mhm.
have a chapter in Honolulu,
That's
and
cool.
they were like, "Hey, we're having our annual conference. You guys should totally come." And we're like, "Yeah, we should. We should totally get out there." So, yeah, everyone's just very inclusive, and just I think it's the openness to always be learning, and
Mhm.
then the openness to always be learning and collaborating and giving back as a mentor, whatever, whatever that could look like. You're just continuously growing. So it's really good stuff.
So you and I have similar skills with respect to design and marketing,
Mhm.
and we both have design backgrounds, but we don't have any like formal degrees in marketing. And I
Mhm.
think that really speaks well to uh, the adaptability,
Yeah.
swift adaptability of graphic designers to be able to jump into those marketing roles.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about how your design background has influenced your work in marketing and sales, and maybe, if true, how design was a great base to start from?
Yeah, that's really cool to think through, because I don't think I think of my background often in the technical sense, right? I think, in terms of graphic design, I haven't had a actual graphic design role in a long time, because it continuously evolved. Excuse me, it continuously evolved into all things marketing, all things sales, because you had to adapt after
Mhm.
the 0809 crash, and then pivoting into different areas to learn different skills to continuously be marketable. in that world as everything was changing digitally. We went to college pre-social media when websites were one page. There was no, like I remember talking to some of our teammates and, talking about being in high school, and I graduated in 2000. Like I was 2 months old, and I'm like, oh my
Jesus.
gosh, you don't even understand the struggle that was the dial-up internet in high school. So that's such an interesting concept. But in terms of the design background, and I tell people this a lot of times when they're like, I don't understand how you're in sales and you went to school for design.
Mhm.
And here are the foundations I learned in my degree that have been able to allow me to be so adaptable and, you know, excel in areas of sales, marketing, and different facets of that. But we would have classes that were, okay, you have to design, here's your design brief, here's the concept, here's the problem to solve.
Mhm.
And so you're solving problems with design, concept development, creative thinking, right? All three of those overlap: design, sales, marketing. All of them apply there. And then whenever we would have to present our solutions, our designs, and what that would look like as if we were pitching to a board,
Right.
I was always the one in the group that was picked to present it because everybody else was super introverted. They didn't want to talk in front of the class.
Right.
I'm like, I got it. Like I'll do that part. That's easy to me, that was the easy part. Sometimes the technical sitting at a computer for 10 hours was my least favorite thing to do. Like I can think of it, I can tell someone the concept, and then like you go ahead and you do it, but I'd rather just hold on to the concept and then I can explain it.
Right.
And so on the sales side, that becomes so incredibly important, is your curiosity, asking the right questions, having the empathy to learn what somebody needs and how you can help them, and then having the creative thinking and knowledge of your product lines, services, etc., on how you can implement what's going to work best for them, not what's going to work best for you, but what's going to work best for them and the relationship and everything moving forward. So all of those things lie in a foundation of knowing design engineering and how to think like a designer, because you're designing marketing, you're designing sales strategies. They're all design strategies that you're applying.
I love that rationale, because you're absolutely right. And to take that one step further, I often tell my students, like, hey, you can use the term graphic designer, and in some respects that is very limited and limiting,
Mhm.
because it creates the perception that you are a producer, right?
Mhm.
It takes away this idea of strategy. So
Right.
it's like, yeah, let's just hire the graphic designer to make it. Well, a designer is a strategic thinker. They have to think about a number. Well, first off, they have to think about the whole system that they're working within, and then think about all the different parts to that system in order to communicate effectively.
Right.
Right. So I'm starting to have an issue with that term.
Mhm.
I instead, for a graphic designer, I prefer visual communicator,
Yeah.
because graphic design is inherently, I believe, a communication discipline.
Yeah.
And when I tell my designers, like, hey, you're going to learn all of these different things through design.
Mhm.
um, Here's why. It's because it's communication. So design is the visual part of communication. Marketing is a completely different part of communication, but that's how they cross each
Right.
other, right? So you need to be aware of communication in general.
Right.
So for a lot of designers and artists to be introverts, I believe that in some respects that can be a significant handicap when
Mhm.
they're trying to communicate, no
Right.
matter how it manifests. Um,
That's so
but
interesting.
yeah,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, it's fine. What are your thoughts?
I was gonna say, It's so true because I think when you have, BS graphic designer, it's such a technical degree and everybody thinks production, right? Like everyone just thinks of the designer in their office, etc. And when we were in school, our professors would say, "We don't want you to graduate and be production artists. We want you to know production, but we don't want you to do that. We want you to be business owners. We want you to
Yep.
be executives. We want you to be creative directors and the like. And you have to do that through thinking strategically." And, it's funny because if you look at a design project, right, and you tell somebody, go and design an invitation, because I used to love to design stationery, invitation, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And you would have someone come up with this elaborate design and it didn't fit in a standard envelope, they have a dead project, right?
Yep.
So you have to always think of the end in mind and say, I have to design a document within these sizes so that it can go through the post office. And you may have to have extra postage. So now you have to think of cost involved as the end result and work backwards with what the production looks like. It's the same thing if you're in marketing, right? Like you have to have someone's budget in mind at the end and work backwards. Or in sales, you have to look at the strategy and say, what are they looking for the ROI to be on their investment with working with us and what we can enhance and produce, et cetera. So
Mhm.
it's the same line of thinking in terms of, I guess you could call it design engineering, no matter what the project might be, but the end result has to be thought of first, and then all the other facets that can come into play along the way that can deter you off course, keep you on course, and get you to that final project, and then where you start. Where I think a lot of people just start with the one, step one, and they don't see the development and where things are going to land,
Mhm.
and then you hit all of the hiccups in between that could have definitely been avoided if you thought strategically from the end.
Right. You consider all the different stakeholder groups or interests, build
Yep.
that in and get them in alignment, build that into your strategy, and then produce accordingly.
Yeah.
That's smart. That's good. And I again, like I think to your to your point, like a design background is going to prepare you for that systems
Mhm.
level thinking.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, uh, I think I'm pretty good at sales.
Mhm.
Ask someone who's a salesperson, they may disagree, but I'm on my fourth company right now. And even to be at my fourth company and having, sold or merged the previous three, I like
Yeah.
to think that I'm kind of good at sales,
Yeah.
right?
I think so.
In order to get to this point. So designers are absolutely having to learn all of the skills of, you know, or I won't say all the skills, but parts of all the skills of marketers and PR people. And especially if you want to run your own business, you need to know some accounting, some finance, and all of these other disciplines. And so that's one reason I think that, designers need to give themselves uh, more consideration when it comes to their careers,
Yeah.
and just exactly what their capabilities are. I had a student when I was at La Roche. I had a student who she got her degree and then
Mhm.
she went right into an MBA program.
Mm. Mhm.
And graphic designers going into MBA programs is fairly atypical. I'll say it's uncommon. I won't
Right.
say it's atypical, but I will say it's uncommon. And it's just now, like within the past few years, that art schools are like Micah and RISD are trying to create the MBA for creative professionals,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
To give them though, because they are recognizing what you and I recognized a decade plus ago,
Right.
that these business skills are absolutely necessary for designers to thrive and prosper.
Right. Yeah, it's that's interesting because I remember a lot of my classmates that went straight into a master's were going to RISD or going to SCAD and they were doing, masters in fine arts. Yep. They were doing, or a, a master's in art history to go back and teach. So I think it's so important And I think a lot of us may be not scared off by an MBA, but that early in your career, potentially, right? Because it's so different from the foundation of the education that you're having. And I would think some people may not struggle, but it's going to be such a different environment once you get into statistics and calculus and,
It's the
you know,
math.
all the things, right? So,
It's the math. I've talked to people about this. So, and I think here's an interesting relationship. So I teach interactive design. I
mhm.
essentially teach logic to artists who don't operate in logic, right? They
Right.
rely on their
Yeah.
illogic to create amazing pieces of art and design, right? Um, so when I introduce logical thinking into web design,
Mhm.
it turns their world upside down. And I
Yeah.
essentially say, like, guys, I'm just teaching you visual math, really.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to break them down a little bit. But I would, without a doubt, say that um, designers in general have a weak spot for math. And
Mhm.
it's like this, not all of them, but a lot.
Mhm.
Um, and it's that intimidation of like, oh my god, I have to do
Mhm.
statistics and all this different type of math. And yeah, that can be very daunting, no doubt. But no one said you had to get an MBA.
Right.
uh, you could get a certificate, or you could get like a minor, or you could do a double
Yeah.
major, and kind of eases off a bit. um,
Here's an interesting little known fact. So when I was in middle school, high school, I started playing the piano when I was 10.
mm,
And music is very mathematical, right? Like very mathematical. So I
absolutely.
feel like artistic people understand math in a very different way.
Yes.
And I had to take, our my high school was very like college preparatory. We took classes for college credit. And, I had calculus in high school and all this kind of stuff. And um, I would get stuck in my homework and I couldn't figure out how to solve some sort of problem. And I
Mhm.
would put down my homework, I would go over to the piano, I would practice for an hour, play whatever I was working on, and come back and sit down and be able to solve the math problem. And I think it's just how you can reorganize your brain in different ways. But again, like I think creative people don't realize that they probably subconsciously are very good at math. It's
Yes.
just in
Thank
the
you.
way that they are applying it and how it makes sense in different ways.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Really
you
interesting.
nailed it. Artists, be be they visual, musical, whatever, they experience math.
Yes.
So,
Mhm.
like, yeah, they may not be great at doing it on paper, and that's a
Right.
left brain, right
Yep.
brain thing, right? But we experience it, and so, like, with music, you've got cadence and rhythm and all.
Yeah.
I mean, sequence, right?
Right.
And pattern. And then in art, you're dealing with compositions and space and
Mhm.
scale. And we do those things intrinsically, organically, it's not even a struggle. We just
Right.
do it. Like, our brains are built for that. But then
Mhm.
when you try to translate that activity onto paper,
Right.
it's impossible
Right.
because there's such dissonance between the two things that it doesn't make sense.
Well, and there's a very symphonic flow in conversation,
Mhm.
in strategy, in connecting dots, in how you think conceptually and creatively. And that is happening in someone's brain that is maybe more of an interactive, right? And so they're able to think very quickly in that flow of whatever they're talking about, doing, etc. And I can feel that, like, I don't even know how else to explain it other than like a symphonic flow of what a conversation can be. And this is kind of unfolding into one of those things. Whereas people that are very analytical can
Mhm.
see those patterns and dots on paper where we can experience them in conversation, in other, like in other things. And it's interesting to evaluate and see those different sides of personalities, of mannerisms, and everything is still a calculated sequence of
Mhm.
some level.
I would argue that it's that sort of natural sort of ability to do that
Mhm.
and react to it that helps make you good at
Mhm.
marketing and sales as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
especially, I mean, especially if you're an extroverted person, because you sort of learn the beats of the process
Mhm.
of trying to onboard a client or a prospective client, and what you need to say, and the tone and even the rhythm within which you need to say it.
Mhm.
Unrelated, but it is quasi-related. I was listening to a podcast, as a Song Exploder,
Mhm.
amazing podcast that breaks down how musicians write their music and
Mhm.
produce all of their songs. And there was Rivers Cuomo, who's the lead singer and main songwriter of
Mhm.
Weezer, right?
Oh, wow.
He,
Mhm.
he was on it, and back in the 90s, like his music was like very personality and soulful driven, right?
Mhm.
You could see it in the lyrics. It was about him. But then at some point in the mid to late 2000s, like he switched, and
Mhm.
he actually has an Excel spreadsheet. This is how he writes his their songs that aren't about anything, by the
Mhm.
way, anymore. They're not about anything. Is my
Right.
interpretation. But he has an Excel spreadsheet, and in one column it's a quote. So what he's doing is he's listening to he's listening for the musicality within which how people speak.
Mm.
So, you
That's so
know,
interesting.
so if I say, if Amelia comes over, my daughter Amelia comes over and says, "Hey daddy, where is that?" I could say, "Oh, I don't know, it's over there." Like you could kind of hear like there's this kind of rhythm or beat to it. And what he does is he'll record the quote, and then he'll chart whether it's high or low.
Hmm.
And then from that, I think what he does is he builds like that high low pattern out of it.
Yep.
So, oh, I don't know. So high and then low.
Mhm.
And then he's able to kind of like uh put those things together
Right.
and then make a song out of it. And I don't know whether like I don't know how to I'm not a musician. My brothers are, and I don't know what they would think about it, but I think that's a fairly or an interesting way to create music.
Yeah.
But bringing it back to marketing and sales, when you're listening for tone and inflection,
Mhm.
and especially when you're in the process of sales, you know what you need to say and when to say
Right.
it. Yeah.
Right. Whenever, everything is energy based, right? Like if I walk into a sales meeting and I'm having a bad day and I'm just kind of, flat,
Mm.
that person's not going to probably respond very well to me, right?
Right.
So you have to bring the energy that
The
you want
performance.
reciprocated, and
Yeah.
how are you going to create that relationship? And that's it's not as much, a lot of people say sales is manipulation, but it's knowing how to read people, knowing your product and service obviously, but then knowing how to have those conversations in a productive way, and not leaving anything on the table that you may have missed or brought to light that then can lead you to the next thing. So yeah, I think that's the fun part. I mean, that's none of that is work to me. Like I'm just love meeting new people. No one's a
Yeah.
stranger, kind of that kind of thing. So yeah.
So, switching gears, because we're getting towards the end of our time together, I'm
Yeah.
curious, considering your multidisciplinary sort of, career and your approach to your work, what advice would you have for, you know, on one hand, design students that are considering branching out into marketing and communications, and then what about marketing students that want to learn more about design? What would you offer both groups?
Mhm. Yeah, so as design students looking to engage into more of a marketing role, I think, everyone has to start somewhere, right? So you may have to start as a designer and, expand in a role, or, a lot of companies hire marketing associates. I think that was my title, in the corporate realm. And, you do design and you learn some other things. But I think that a couple different things, getting involved in any type of like AIGA, AMA organization, right? Like you're going to start to meet people that have crossover skills. Finding mentors early on is really important. I've always had a mentor throughout my career, depending on where I was looking to go. So finding people that are in positions that you eventually want to be in are great to reach out to. And I feel like most people are willing to mentor at some level or take a coffee meeting. Um, I think that, you know, back when I was entry level, there wasn't HubSpot Academy, Trailhead,
Yeah.
there wasn't anything out there where you could pick a topic that you were looking to learn and do, trainings on it and get certified. So I think the more you can be proactive, and then, in your role, share that as one of your goals with your supervisor. I know this is my core, but I would love to learn more of this area of our business in the marketing realm. And how am I able to get more experience to do that? And unless you ask, people don't know that you're interested in that. And that also helps continuously open doors for, where you're looking to go. And I think a lot of what I just said applies the other side. So I think if you're in marketing and you're looking to maybe learn more design skills, design engineering, design concepts, again, work with a creative director, reach out to an agency owner that has come up from designer to owner and everything in between. I think that that's really and find a couple of them and see what the trends are and how people have, made those jumps in, different realms of what that looks like.
Fantastic advice. Lauren, if folks are interested in learning more about the AMA or maybe have questions for you, how can they find the AMA? How can they reach out to you?
Yeah. So our local chapter website is amapittsburgh.org. National's ama.org. So there's a ton of resources, articles, newsletters, seminars, etc., that you can check out on there. So there's always great things. You can find me on LinkedIn. Just search Lauren Norris. And I am always open to having a coffee meeting virtually, hopefully in person as things calm down. And I'm always, available to mentor as well if anyone's interested.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for your time. Hopefully we can do this again.
Yeah.
And I'll look forward to seeing how your career continues to grow and flourish and develop, especially at Butler.
Yeah. Awesome. It's been great, RJ. Thanks for having me.
All right.